Most people start this conversation in the wrong place with blame, shame, and the quiet belief that belly fat exists because of weak discipline. But that idea collapses the moment biology enters the room because the human body does not store fat based on motivation or character. It responds to signals, chemical signals, survival signals, hormonal signals, and the belly is the most sensitive place of all. So, before anything else, hear this clearly and let it land. Belly fat is not a willpower problem, it is a biology problem. And once you understand that, everything you think you know about fat loss starts to change. In this video, you are going to learn why the body protects fat around the belly more than anywhere else, why trying harder often makes the problem worse, and why many people who eat less and train more still see their waist grow instead of shrink. This is not motivational talk, and it is not comfort talk either. It is a factual breakdown of how the body actually works, explained in simple language, without complicated terms, because the truth is already dramatic enough. The body does not care about social media standards or gym culture. It cares about survival, safety, and balance. And when those systems feel threatened, fat storage becomes a defense, not a failure, especially around the belly, where vital organs live. And here is the lesser known part that almost no one talks about clearly. Belly fat has more hormone receptors than other fat, which means it listens more closely to stress, sleep, blood sugar, and hunger signals than to calorie math. That is why two people can eat the same food, do the same workouts, and get completely different results, because their internal signals are not the same. And this video will walk you through that invisible layer that most advice skips. You will learn how hormones quietly decide where fat goes, when it stays, and why it refuses to leave. You will also learn why extreme dieting, constant workouts, and guilt-based routines often send the wrong signals to the body, pushing it deeper into protection mode. This is where the drama really sits, not in before and after photos, but in the silent conversation happening inside the body every day, a conversation most people never hear, yet it controls their results. By the end of this video, you will understand why calling people lazy is not just wrong, but scientifically careless. You will understand why effort without alignment fails, and why fixing signals works better than fighting the body. This knowledge alone can lift years of frustration off your shoulders, because once you stop blaming yourself, you can finally start working with your biology instead of against it. And stay till the end, because the final part connects all of this into one simple idea that changes how you approach food, exercise, and recovery forever. An idea that explains why some people lose belly fat without extreme struggle while others stay stuck, despite doing everything they are told. This is not about shortcuts or magic solutions. It is about clarity, and clarity is powerful. So if you are ready to replace guilt with understanding and confusion with real science, you are in the right place. Welcome to the channel, where health is explained without noise and without shame. If this kind of content helps you see your body differently, subscribe now so you do not miss what comes next, because the next videos will go even deeper into how signals control fat, hunger, and long-term health. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. For a long time, the story around belly fat has been harsh and one-sided, and most people quietly accept it without questioning it. They look in the mirror, and the first thought is not curiosity, but blame. The assumption that something is wrong with their discipline, their mindset, their habits. So the response feels logical. They decide to push harder, eat less, train more, wake up earlier, skip meals, add workouts, stack rules on top of rules. And yet, instead of relief, they feel heavier, more tired, more frustrated. The body feels tighter and more stressed. And the belly, the very place they are trying to change, seems to resist even more. This is the moment where many people feel unseen, because effort is there, consistency is there, sacrifice is there, but results are not. And this disconnect creates guilt, because when the common advice does not work, the blame turns inward. But the reality is much simpler and much kinder than that. If effort alone decided fat loss, this struggle would not exist. The truth is that many of the people who struggle most with belly fat are the ones who are trying the hardest, and that alone tells you something important, because the body does not respond to effort the way people think it does. It responds to signals, internal signals, that have nothing to do with motivation and everything to do with safety, balance, and survival. And when those signals are misunderstood, more effort does not help. It backfires, because the body interprets constant restriction and constant training as stress, and stress changes how fat is stored, especially around the belly. So the reframe matters here deeply, because if effort were the real issue, the problem would already be solved. The hours spent dieting and training would have paid off long ago, but since they have not, it means the system being targeted is the wrong one. And this is where clarity replaces blame, because belly fat is not controlled by motivation. It is controlled by hormones, quiet chemical messengers that decide when to store, when to release, and where fat is placed. The body stores fat on purpose, not by accident, and the belly is a priority location because it protects vital organs, the liver, the intestines, the systems that keep you alive, and protection is always the body's first job. So when signals suggest danger, instability, or long-term stress, fat storage becomes a strategy, not a mistake. And this is why belly fat behaves differently from fat in other areas. It is more responsive, more reactive, more guarded. It listens closely to what is happening inside the body rather than what is happening in the gym or on a calorie tracker. And this difference matters because belly fat has a higher concentration of hormone receptors, which means it responds faster and more strongly to changes in stress hormones, blood sugar hormones, and hunger signals. So when stress rises, belly fat is one of the first places to react. When sleep drops, it reacts again. When meals are skipped or calories are cut too aggressively, it reacts again. And this creates the illusion that the body is stubborn or broken, when in reality it is simply doing its job very well, listening and responding. And this is why focusing only on calories often fails, because calories are just one input, but hormones decide how those calories are used, whether they are burned, stored, or conserved. And the belly listens to hormones more than calories, which explains so many confusing experiences people have, like eating less but losing nothing, or training more and feeling softer, or doing everything right on paper and still feeling stuck. The signals underneath are louder than the surface actions, and to understand those signals, it helps to look at the three main hormones involved, not in a complex scientific way, but in a practical human way, because these hormones shape daily reality, whether people realize it or not. Insulin is the first, and its role is storage. When insulin is high, the body is in storage mode, especially for fat. This does not make insulin bad, it makes it powerful, because insulin rises in response to food, especially sugar and refined carbs. And when it stays high for long periods, fat loss becomes difficult, particularly around the belly. Cortisol is the second, and cortisol is the stress signal. It rises when the body feels pressure, lack of sleep, emotional strain, overtraining, undereating, and constant busyness. And cortisol has a direct relationship with belly fat because belly fat tissue has more cortisol receptors, meaning it responds faster to stress than other fat. And when cortisol stays elevated, the body prioritizes storing fat in the belly as a protective measure, not because it wants to sabotage you, but because it is trying to keep energy available during perceived danger. Leptin is the third, and leptin controls hunger and long-term fat regulation. It tells the brain whether there is enough energy stored. When leptin works well, appetite feels normal, and fat loss feels possible. But when leptin signaling is disrupted, often by chronic dieting and stress, hunger increases, and fat loss slows, creating a cycle where eating less feels harder, and results feel slower. And this combination explains why simply pushing harder rarely works, because pushing harder increases cortisol, disrupts leptin, and keeps insulin elevated in unpredictable ways, especially when meals are irregular or extreme. So the body receives a mixed message, scarcity on one side and stress on the other, and in response it chooses protection, which often shows up as belly fat. This is why many people notice that the belly is the last place to change and the first place to return, because it is tied to these deeper systems, and until those systems feel safe, balanced, and supported, fat loss feels like a fight, and the body always wins fights against itself. So the idea that people just need more discipline ignores this entire internal process. It overlooks how biology actually works, and it keeps people stuck in cycles of effort and disappointment, because motivation cannot override hormones. It can only temporarily mask their effects, and eventually the signals become louder than willpower. This understanding does not remove responsibility, it redirects it away from punishment and toward alignment, because once the body feels supported instead of threatened, the signals change, and when the signals change, fat storage changes with them, especially in the belly. And this is why two people can follow the same plan and get different results, because their internal environment is different, their stress levels are different, their sleep is different, their hormonal responses are different, and fat loss is not a moral scoreboard. It is a biological outcome, driven by inputs most people are never taught to see, and the more this is understood, the less shame there is, because the struggle stops feeling personal and starts feeling mechanical, something that can be adjusted rather than judged. And this shift alone often brings relief, because it explains years of confusion without accusing effort, and it opens the door to a different approach, one that works with the body instead of constantly trying to overpower it. The idea of eating less and moving more sounds clean and logical on the surface, and that is exactly why it spread so fast. But the body does not work on logic, it works on interpretation. And when calories drop too low or training volume rises too high, the body does not see discipline, it sees pressure, it sees instability, it sees a possible threat to survival. And that interpretation changes everything. Extreme dieting sends a clear message that food is scarce, and scarcity raises internal stress. Even if the person feels motivated on the outside, cortisol begins to rise quietly, sleep often becomes lighter, recovery slows down, hunger signals become louder, and fat loss begins to stall, not because the body is failing, but because it is adapting. And overtraining adds another layer of stress. On top of that, long workouts, daily intense sessions, very little rest, all of it signals to the body that energy is being burned faster than it can be replaced, and cortisol rises again to keep fuel available. And when cortisol stays elevated, the body becomes protective. It holds on to fat, especially around the belly, because that is the safest storage place for quick energy. So while the person feels like they are doing everything right, the hormonal environment quietly shifts into storage mode. And this is the part almost no one explains properly. The same behaviors that feel productive can send the opposite signal internally. So fat loss slows down, water retention increases, cravings intensify, and the belly becomes more stubborn. And this creates frustration, because the response most people choose is to push even harder, cut more calories, add more workouts, tighten rules, and that only amplifies the stress signal further, creating a loop where effort increases, but results decrease. And this is why the phrase, eat less, move more, backfires so often, because it ignores the hormonal cost of constant pressure. And the harder you push, the more your body resists, not out of defiance, but out of self-preservation. The body does not care how badly you want abs, it cares about staying alive, balanced, and fueled enough to function. And when those needs feel threatened, fat becomes insurance, especially belly fat. And this pattern explains why many people lose weight initially and then hit a wall, or why they lose weight everywhere except the belly, because the belly is the last place the body is willing to let go when stress is high. And this leads directly into one of the most damaging myths in health culture, the laziness myth. The idea that people who carry belly fat simply do not try hard enough, when in reality, many of them are the most consistent, the most disciplined, the most willing to sacrifice. They train harder, they eat less, they try plan after plan, program after program, hoping the next one will finally work. And this constant effort is invisible to outsiders, so it gets misread as lack of discipline. But lazy people do not struggle this much. They do not track meals, wake up early to train, push through exhaustion, or spend years searching for answers. Struggle at this level only exists where effort already lives, and this misunderstanding creates shame, because people start believing the problem is their character instead of their physiology. And shame is a stressor, and stress feeds the same hormonal loop that keeps belly fat in place. So the myth becomes self-reinforcing. Blame increases stress, stress increases fat storage increases blame, and the cycle continues. And breaking that cycle does not start with more punishment. It starts with changing what the body is responding to, because effort is not the main lever here. Signals are. Signals from sleep, from stress, from how food is spaced and timed, from how often the body is allowed to recover. And this is where the real shift begins, not in doing less, but in doing differently. Understanding that sleep is not optional for fat loss, because hormones reset during rest, that stress is not just mental but physical and chemical, that food timing affects insulin and cortisol rhythms, and that recovery is not weakness, but a requirement for hormonal balance. None of these need to be explained fully yet, because what matters now is the mental shift, realizing that the body responds to how safe and supported it feels, not how hard it is being pushed. And this is why two people with the same calorie intake and training schedule can get different results, because one body feels threatened and the other feels stable, and stability allows release of stored energy, release of belly fat, release of constant hunger and tension. And this leads to the biggest takeaway of all, one that changes the entire relationship with fat loss. Your body is not broken, it is protecting you from what it perceives as long-term stress and uncertainty. And once that protection is no longer needed, the body changes naturally, not through force, but through trust. And that understanding alone can quiet years of frustration, because it reframes the struggle from personal failure to biological response, and that shift opens the door to a completely different way forward. If this made sense to you, you are already ahead of most people, because understanding always comes before change. And the moment you stop blaming yourself and start listening to how your body actually works, everything becomes lighter, the struggle feels less personal, and progress finally feels possible. This video was not meant to push you or pressure you. It was meant to give you clarity, and clarity is powerful, because when you understand why something happens, you stop fighting blindly and start moving with intention. So take a moment and let this land. Nothing is wrong with you. Your body has been responding exactly the way it was designed to respond. And now you know that. If this perspective helped you see your body differently, let us know by liking this video. It helps this message reach people who need it just as much. And if you know someone who is still stuck in the cycle of guilt and over effort, share this with them. It might be the shift they have been missing. And if you want more videos that explain health without shame and without noise, subscribe to the channel so you do not miss what comes next, because in the next video we are going to break down something most people overlook completely. What you eat and when you eat it matters more than how little you eat. And once you understand that, belly fat stops being a mystery and starts making sense.